Welcome to Quick Savant's Book Talk. In the anxious generation, Jonathan Haidt unveils the alarming link between smartphones, social media, and the surge in teen mental illness. This #1 New York Times bestseller explores how the shift from play-based to phone-based childhoods since 2010 has rewired young minds, causing anxiety, depression, and more. Haidt offers data-driven insights and actionable solutions for simple rules for parents, schools, and governments to restore healthier. A must-read for anyone raising kids in the digital age. This book is a wake-up call to protect General Z from tech's grip. Amazon links to buy in description. Protect your eyes from the sun with stylish state-of-the-art sunglasses from COSTA. A must if you drive or are near the water or snow. See what's out there. Click and buy anything within 24 hours on Amazon to earn a small commission for Quick Savant, which he will use to feed his multiple rescue dogs.
Quick Savant published an illustrated 210-page mega-summary for $4.99 and corresponding audiobook. Check out the links.
Introduction: Raising Children on Mars. Imagine a scenario where, on your child's 10th birthday, a renowned billionaire you've never met selects her to join the first human colony on Mars. Her stellar academic record and a genetic profile, analyzed without your explicit permission, secured her place. Unbeknownst to you, she enrolled herself in the mission, driven by her passion for space exploration and the fact that her friends are also signing up. She pleads with you to allow her to go. Before dismissing the idea, you decide to investigate further. You discover that the mission targets children because they adapt more readily to Mars' unique environment, particularly its low gravity. If children experience puberty and growth on Mars, their bodies may become permanently attuned to their conditions, unlike adults who arrive later. However, it's uncertain whether these Mars-adapted children could ever return to Earth. Concerns mount as you delve deeper. Radiation is a significant issue. Earth's magnetosphere shields its inhabitants from harmful solar winds, cosmic rays, and other damaging particles. Mars lacks this protection, meaning your daughter's DNA would be exposed to far higher levels of radiation. The mission's planners have designed shields based on studies of adult astronauts who face a slightly increased cancer risk after a year in space. But children, with their rapidly developing and diversifying cells, are at greater risk of cellular damage. You find no evidence that the planners considered this heightened vulnerability or conducted child-specific safety research. Gravity presents another worry. Earth's creatures evolved under a consistent gravitational force, shaping their bones, muscles, joints, and cardiovascular systems. In the weightlessness of space, adult astronauts experience muscle weakening, bone density loss, and fluid shifts that affect their brains and eyes. Mars gravity, at just 38% of Earth's, could cause severe developmental issues in children, potentially leading to deformities in their skeletons, hearts, eyes, and brains. Again, you find no indication that the planners accounted for these risks. Would you let her go? Absolutely not. The notion of sending children to Mars, possibly never to return, seems utterly reckless. The company behind the mission appears driven by a rush to claim Mars before competitors, showing little understanding of or concern for child development. Shockingly, they don't require verified parental consent. Just a child's checkbox claiming permission is enough to launch them into space. Surely, no company could endanger children without parental approval and escape significant legal consequences. Or could they? The dawn of the digital age. At the turn of the millennium, West Coast tech firms in the United States developed transformative products that capitalized on the burgeoning internet. A wave of techno-optimism swept through society. These innovations made life more convenient, enjoyable, and efficient. Some fostered connections and communication, seemingly poised to bolster emerging democracies. Following the collapse of the Iron Curtain, it felt like the start of a new era. The founders of these companies were celebrated as visionaries and benefactors, delivering divine gifts to humanity, much like Prometheus. However, the tech revolution wasn't just reshaping adult lives, it was profoundly altering childhood. Since the 1950s, children had spent hours watching television, but these new technologies were far more portable, personalized, and captivating. Parents quickly noticed as I did in 2008 when my 2-year-old son effortlessly navigated my first iPhone's touch and swipe interface. Many parents found smartphones and tablets could keep children quietly entertained for hours, but was this safe? No one knew for sure, yet the widespread adoption suggested it was acceptable. Tech companies conducted minimal, if any, research on the mental health impacts of their products on children, and shared no data with independent researchers. When confronted with mounting evidence of harm, many resorted to denial, obfuscation, and PR campaigns. Companies that prioritized engagement through psychological tactics to keep young users hooked were particularly culpable. They ensnared children during critical developmental phases when their brains were rapidly adapting to stimuli. Social media platforms disproportionately harmed girls, while video games and pornography sites targeted boys. By flooding children's senses with addictive content and displacing physical play and face-to-face socializing, these companies fundamentally altered childhood on an unprecedented scale. The most intense period of this transformation occurred between 2010 and 2015, though the story begins with the rise of overprotective parenting in the 1980s and extends through the COVID-19 pandemic to today. What legal safeguards exist? In the United States, which set global norms, the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act, COPPA, of 1998 requires parental consent for children under 13 to share numbers of the Internet's leading platforms. This set the Internet adulthood age at 13. A decision more about data collection than child safety. The law doesn't mandate age verification. A child can access most online spaces by simply checking a box or entering a false birth date. For instance, 40% of American children under 13 have Instagram accounts, yet U.S. federal laws have not been updated since 1998. The UK and some U.S. states have taken preliminary steps. Some tech companies mirror the tobacco and vaping industries, designing addictive products and sidestepping laws restricting marketing to minors. They also resemble oil companies that resisted bans on leaded gasoline, despite evidence that lead emissions impaired children's cognitive development and increased antisocial behavior. Unlike tobacco, however, social media offers adults valuable tools for finding information, jobs, friends, and more, making it a cherished part of modern life. While adults may struggle with online addiction, we typically grant them autonomy, as we do with alcohol or gambling. Minors, however, are different. Their reward-seeking brain regions develop before their frontal cortex, which governs self-control and impulse resistance, matures fully in the mid-20s. Preteens, especially, are socially insecure, susceptible to peer pressure, and drawn to activities promising validation. We don't allow preteens to buy tobacco, alcohol, or enter casinos, recognizing their vulnerability. The costs of social media for adolescents are high, with minimal benefits compared to adults. Children should grow up in the real world before venturing into the virtual one. The story of General Z. This book chronicles the experiences of Generation Z, born after 1995, often called the anxious generation. Unlike arbitrary marketing labels that peg General Z's end around 2010, I argue the anxious generation persists until we address the conditions fueling their anxiety. Social psychologist Jean Twenge's research highlights how generational differences stem not just from events like wars or recessions, but also from childhood technologies: radio, television, computers, the internet, and the iPhone. Gen Z's oldest members hit puberty around 2009, when high-speed broadband, the iPhone 2007, and viral social media features like and retweet buttons 2009 converged, amplifying online toxicity. By 2010, front-facing smartphone cameras and Facebook's acquisition of Instagram 2012 fueled a surge in curated self-presentation, hitting girls especially hard. Gen Z became the first generation to navigate puberty with a pocket-sized portal to an addictive, unstable virtual universe ill-suited for young minds. Social success in this world demanded constant management of an online persona, essential for peer acceptance and avoiding public shaming. Teens spent hours scrolling through polished posts and algorithm-driven content, reducing time for physical play, face-to-face interaction, and embodied social behaviors critical for human development. Gen Z, in essence, became the first generation to grow up on Mars. The Great Rewiring of Childhood. This transformation isn't solely about technology. A parallel trend, overprotecting children in the real world, curtailed their autonomy. Free play, vital for mammalian development, inoculates children against future challenges. Yet starting in the 1980s, fears of kidnappers and predators slashed unsupervised outdoor play, coinciding with the rise of personal computers as alluring indoor alternatives. By the mid-2010s, most adolescents had smartphones, marking the shift from a play-based to a phone-based childhood, encompassing laptops, tablets, and gaming consoles. This shift deprived children of physical and social experiences needed to build competencies, overcome fears, and gain independence. Virtual interactions couldn't fully replace these losses, and online kids wandered adult spaces, encountering harmful content and interactions. While parents minimized real-world risks, they often unknowingly granted virtual freedom, struggling to comprehend or regulate the digital realm. I argue that overprotection in the real world and underprotection online are the primary drivers of General Z's anxiety. Defining real and virtual worlds. The real world involves embodied, synchronous one-to-one or small group interactions within stable communities, with high barriers to entry and exit, fostering deep relational investment. Conversely, the virtual world is disembodied, often asynchronous, and involves one-to-many broadcasts in fluid communities with low commitment, encouraging disposable relationships. While real-world families may use digital tools, and historical letter-based relationships resembled virtual ones, the key is relational commitment. Stable communities teach children to manage emotions and relationships, a skill less honed in transient online networks. Book structure and solutions. This book unfolds in 4 parts. Section 1 documents the mental health decline since 2010, with sharp rises in anxiety, depression, and self-harm, especially among girls. Part 2 traces the roots to 1990s overprotection and smartphone proliferation, which blocked critical experiences. Part 3 details 4 harms: sleep deprivation, social deprivation, attention fragmentation, and addiction, showing social media's causal role in girls' mental illness and boys' failure to launch. Part 4 proposes reforms for families, schools, and governments to address collective action problems, where coordinated efforts yield better outcomes. 4 foundational reforms include delaying smartphones until high school, social media until 16, enforcing phone-free schools, and restoring unsupervised play. These low-cost changes, if widely adopted, could improve adolescent mental health within 2 years, especially as immersive technologies like AI and spatial computing loom. Ancient wisdom and modern challenges. Ancient philosophers like Epictetus and Marcus Aurelius warned against letting others control our minds, a concern echoed in today's social media-driven emotional volatility. Adults, too, face distraction and exhaustion from digital interruptions. As AI-generated content complicates the virtual world, reclaiming mental clarity is urgent. This book is for anyone seeking to understand how the rapid rewiring of human relationships has fractured focus, empathy, and connection. It's a call to restore human life for all generations, starting with the anxious generation. Section 1. A Tidal Wave. Chapter 1. The Surge in Suffering. When I discuss smartphones, social media, and video games with parents of teenagers, the conversation often reveals recurring themes. Parents share stories that typically follow a few distinct patterns. One common narrative is the endless struggle. Parents try to set rules and boundaries, but with so many devices, constant pleas to relax restrictions, and countless ways to bypass limits, conflicts over technology dominate family life. Maintaining traditions and basic human connections feels like battling an overwhelming tide that engulfs both parents and children. Most parents I speak with don't describe a diagnosed mental disorder, but express a nagging fear that something is amiss, that their children, increasingly immersed online, are missing out on essential experiences, perhaps nearly everything. Occasionally, though, parents share darker tales, believing their child has been fundamentally changed. I spoke with a mother in Boston about the measures she and her husband took to curb their 14-year-old daughter Emily's Instagram use. They saw its harmful effects clearly and tested various tools to monitor and restrict her phone apps. Yet, family life turned into a relentless conflict, and Emily always found ways to evade the controls. In a particularly distressing episode, she accessed her mother's phone, disabled the monitoring software, and threatened suicide if it was reinstated. Her mother shared, she says the only way to escape social media and her smartphone is to live on a remote island. Every summer she attends a 6-week tech-free camp, and when we pick her up, she's her true self again. But the moment she gets her phone back, the tension and gloom return. Last year, when I took her smartphone away for 2 months and gave her a flip phone, she was herself again. Stories about boys often center on video games, and sometimes pornography, rather than social media, particularly when a boy shifts from casual to compulsive gaming. A carpenter told me about his 14-year-old son James, who has mild autism. Before COVID, James was progressing in school and judo. When schools closed, his parents bought him a PlayStation to occupy him at home. Initially, the games and online friends improved his life. But as he played Fortnite for longer stretches, his behavior changed. His father recalled, that's when the sadness, anger, and lethargy poured out. He started yelling at us. Alarmed by this shift, James's parents removed his gaming equipment. James then refused to leave his room, showing withdrawal symptoms like irritability and aggression. We tried limiting his use, but his only friends are online, so how much can we cut him off? His parents wondered, noting that his symptoms eased after a few days. Across these stories, parents share a universal sense of helplessness, trapped by a world where resisting technology risks socially isolating their children. In this chapter, I'll present evidence of a profound shift that began in the early 2010s, contributing to a decline in adolescent mental health. Before diving into the data, I wanted to convey the lived experiences of parents who feel their children have been swept away and are struggling to reconnect with them. The initial surge. In the 2000s, there were no signs of an impending mental health crisis among teenagers. Then, in the early 2010s, everything changed abruptly. Each case of mental illness has a unique backstory involving genetics, childhood experiences, and societal factors. My focus is on why Gen Z, and some late millennials, saw a spike in mental illness rates across multiple countries between 2010 and 2015, unlike previous generations. Why did adolescent anxiety and depression surge globally during this period? In early 2018, Greg and I finished The Coddling of the American Mind, which included a graph with data up to 2016. The graph was updated by Quick Savant, Figure 1.2, to reflect recent trends. The U.S. government conducts an annual survey asking teens about drug use and mental health, including whether they've experienced prolonged periods of feeling sad, empty, or depressed, or lost interest in things you usually enjoy. Answering yes to 5 or more of 9 questions about depressive symptoms indicates a likely, major depressive episode in the past year. Chart 1.1. Adolescent Depression Data for Teen Depression Rates, 2004 to 2023. The following data is compiled from sources like the National Survey on Drug Use and Health, NSDUH, and other studies cited in the provided references, focusing on the prevalence of major depressive episodes, MDE, among U.S. adolescents aged 12 to 17. An MDE is defined as a period of at least 2 weeks of depressed mood or loss of interest, plus additional symptoms like sleep issues, low energy, or concentration problems, per DSM criteria. Figure 1.1, Line graph of prevalence of major depressive episodes, MDE, among adolescents from 2004 to 2023. Source: ChatGPT. Starting in 2012, major depressive episodes spiked sharply. The period from 2010 to 2015 in Figure 1.1 and subsequent graphs is the Great Rewiring period. The increase was much larger for girls in absolute terms, new cases since 2010, with a clearer hockey stick shape, but both genders saw similar relative increases, about 150% or 2.5 times the 2010 baseline. This rise affected all racial and socioeconomic groups. By 2020, data collected before and after COVID lockdowns showed 1 in 4 American teen girls had experienced a major depressive episode in the past year. Post-2020, the upward trend steepened, but most of the increase predated COVID. The nature of the crisis. What happened to teens in the early 2010s? To understand the causes and potential solutions, we must identify who was affected, which disorders surged, and when. My team investigated this, and this chapter details our findings. Analyzing more adolescent mental health data revealed key clues. First, the surge centers on internalizing disorders, depression and anxiety marked by intense internal distress, such as worry, fear, sadness, and hopelessness. Those affected often ruminate and withdraw socially. In contrast, externalizing disorders like conduct issues or aggression involve outward-directed distress. Across cultures and age groups, girls are more prone to internalizing disorders, boys to externalizing ones. Since the early 2010s, both genders have seen rising internalizing disorders and declining externalizing ones. College mental health. The percentage of U.S. undergraduates reporting professional